So today for Gaule's question time, I've got the pleasure of being joined by, I suppose, an old friend, Annette.
Hi, Andrew.
Good to see you again, Annette. So it was good, great catching up on that again. And I was looking back at our LinkedIn sort of connections and back to when it was like over 12 years ago when you were in Applied Ventures and when I was back and forth to California with the corporate
Yep.
venturing sort of academies and sort of things like that, that we got to know each other. And it'd be great to catch up with you now on what you've done sort of since, because I think the lessons about venturing and technology I think are great. So great to
Yeah.
hear what you've been doing.
Yeah. I think back then we called it open innovation, right?
Yeah,
And I think the other term we used was the third wave of corporate venturing. I don't know what wave we would be on today, 12, 15 years later, but it certainly changed and evolved, and corporate venture has earned its respect and its place in the industry without a doubt, especially for hard tech, deep tech companies like ours.
mm-hmm. So just remind us what Applied Ventures was and what you did in that corporate venturing, so then we'll get on to how you've moved to the other side, I guess.
Sure. So my first corporate venture group was actually Daimler Chrysler Corporate Venture
Uh-huh.
in the late 90s. I guess I was but a girl. There I invested in both what we called portal technologies, the internet,
Yeah,
and fuel cells. And At the end of what was Daimler Chrysler, I was asked to go out and take over Mindshadow as CEO, which was my first time as CEO. It was basically a search platform for in-car infotainment, developed at Stanford and spun out of Stanford. And that was a really great experience. I can't tell you how much I learned. I took the reins on September 4th, 2001, and then 9/11 happened. And if you want to get a crash course in fundraising, world event,
yeah.
56 VC meetings in 6 weeks. And we raised money and we saved the company. So that was a good experience. But then I actually went out to do exactly what you are referring to. I was living in China at the time, in Shanghai, for a couple of years. And the executives from Applied Materials came back to me and said, "Hey, remember that venture idea that you pitched back in 99? Would you be interested in coming back into the company and founding a new venture fund?" And so I did that in 2004. And we basically took down what was Applied Materials Ventures, which was an outside exterior fund. And we created Applied Ventures. I founded that and built it up. And we grew an amazing team. It's basically an early stage venture fund. Its initial mandate was to invest in things that we didn't want to own. We just wanted to support technology development, learn about, see where we could help startups in hard tech move forward faster through our infrastructure, which I think is one of the core responsibilities of corporate venture. So it was a great experience. I was there 7 years, and then I fell in love with a company that we met through the fund, and I went out to become the CEO of what became Ketra Technologies, which has been sold to Lutron, the world's largest lighting controls company. And from there, I actually went on to the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, which is the venture fund of the World Bank. And I continued to invest in battery and solid state lighting, and until I joined EnPower, roughly 2016-ish.
Yeah, great. So you've seen, like I have, the waves and that, as you said, of this open innovation. Just drawing some parallels to yours. I originally started what I called Henley Incubator back in 2000, and did the MVP of it, getting corporates together in 2000 to 2001, and then went through the bit of incorporating that in the summer of 2001, and we're all ready to go into the September, and had that 9/11 experience as well of, oh my God, what are we going to do for the next number of months? And then I think I've seen like you've had, we've gone through those phases of corporate venturers who've got their purpose aligned, got a right process, managed to know how they work with the external partners, and as you said, found their real niche about helping these ventures to scale up, helping the core business to get aligned and bring those ideas inside. And of course, there's been lots of corporate venture units that have come and gone because, we're going to make billions and we're going to create, unicorns. I don't think were around in the 2000 when we first started.
No, for sure not.
That myth came a bit later, and all of that.
So. I think we called them black swans back then.
Yeah,
we went from swans to unicorns.
Yeah, that's right. So
the ideas are the same. The verbiage just changes.
Yeah. So now you've moved on to the other side now with EnPower. Give us a bit of an insight about what that business is about. And
yeah, so EnPower is a lithium-ion battery company. We make lithium-ion batteries for things that roll, float, and fly. Essentially, what the technology solves is the trade-off between energy and power. So right now, or for the last 20 plus years, when an end user specifies a lithium-ion battery for an application, they have to choose between a power cell and an energy cell. An energy cell is like a range cell, right? It's where Tesla started way back when. You wanted to get as much range as you could. And the problem is, in things, for example, that fly, right? You need a lot of power to get off the ground. You need a lot of power to get safely back on the ground. You actually need a lot of energy to get from point A to point B. Right. So you need both in the same package, and that's what EnPower solves. And we've been around since 2015.
And could you just explain a little bit more about the different sort of battery technologies and sort of stuff like that? Because some of the stuff I've just been reading, is the Chinese versions, are they the best, or is there a new technology? Is there, of the key ingredients that go into them, the sourcing of them? What's the sort of key issues now for the industry, and maybe what the challenges you're facing?
Well, I mean, in 2021, it goes back and it's a long story, but the short of it is the market for electric vehicles has hit that tipping point. Yeah. Sometime in 2020, which is ironic because we were all staying at home in 2020, and that's when electric vehicles took off. It's totally counterintuitive, but that is what happened ultimately. And the sheer amount of battery capacity that's required to underpin that market and that growth over the next 10 years, there are numbers that we can't even really understand. And so as was my strategy through my whole career, when everyone is running to the left, I look to the right and see what's underserved. And so we actually made a decision to buy a gigafactory in Indianapolis, Indiana, and 1.5 gigawatt hours, and focus on all of those segments that are going electric that are not served by this industry, right? The big guys, Panasonic, LG, Samsung, they're really focused on electric vehicles, right? And so things like construction, mining, things that fly, marine, they're really emerging industries that are dependent upon getting high performance batteries, and most of them want American made. And so that's how we focus our business. And we are actually a traditional lithium ion. So we use only off-the-shelf materials. We're not trying to develop the magic molecule. Right. For example, the solid state guys are trying to do, or the lithium metal guys are trying to do. We're really in between what is currently being produced and what is 10 years down the road. We are that next step.
Yeah. And I suppose a perspective I'd raise with you, and I'd like to get your views. This whole bit about a technology change and then changing the markets, as you're sort of saying, you and I met back in, I think you were part of the tour we did 2008. I brought a bunch of executives from the corporate venture. We come to Silicon Valley in 2008. We brought a bunch of, we'd meet people like you in Applied Ventures. Tesla was one of the visits we did in that journey in 2008.
Right.
And we had executives there from BAE, PowerGen, BP, and all that. And we were in Tesla in their startup phase. And it was the first, as it was that weekend, the week that we were there, it was the first time their production cars, which was the old Lotus designed one, was coming off the production line. And I remember saying, I've got cartoons and images that we did there. Then I saying, guys, this is not just a different powertrain. This is fundamentally going to change the value chain. So you oil companies, you car companies, you energy companies, new software companies, you better think about how the value chain is going to change in that here. And it's about that, those technologies going in. And one of the ventures I'm involved with now is in circular economy. And I think we're following a similar strategy to you in that it's the niche areas. So it's the generators, it's the off-highway areas, it's the industrial compressors that we're sort of focused on, because those things have got problems that aren't going to be solved by we'll just switch to battery power then, or we just switch to, like most cars will be able to do the switch because they'll do BYD or they'll do Tesla or sort of stuff like that. But there's lots of use cases that the value chain is going to change. Are you seeing that as well now that you're finding your niches in these new value chains?
Yeah, I mean, oh goodness, I can't remember who came up with this 5 circle Venn diagram of product market fit for the new generation of startups. But, today it is more, what's your value proposition? What does the world need? Who's willing to pay for it, right? I mean, there are more circles than we ever had before to figure out where your space is. And I think the most successful startups, well, I mean, this will be borne out in 10 years, but I think the most successful startups today are those that are really taking the time to hone that picture. And we took quite a long time. We had the luxury of doing so because the market was sort of still evolving, and we were able to, and we were evolving our technology as well, right? So we just kept really aware of what was going on and continued talking to the voice of the customer, right? And then really determine the path which could give us the greatest chance for success. I think a lot of times we go in as startups and we're forced by virtue of fundraising to say, this is the business plan and I've got a B, so it must be fundable, right? I think if we really start to think about the land and expand, for hard tech especially, maybe for software and other applications, the B is critically important. But for those of us who are in industries that exist, industrial wares, industrial uses, we have to think of how we can get in, build a solid, sustainably profitable business that we can then, become the next GE.
And just in the examples you've given here, you've talked about the niches you're in, but you've mentioned airplanes and sort of stuff like that. So,
sure.
So now
it's a balance, right? Of the old school and the Willy Wonka golden ticket, right?
Yeah,
you want to be prepared.
Yeah,
you want to be prepared.
Yeah. So where's your feel and your balance of that at the moment? Because one of the sectors we're doing the one of my ventures in is oil lubricant recycling and the change in that and these heavy utilization spaces is relatively easy to do, but then I'm conscious that we don't want our business to go into these far out places. So how are you managing that balance now between, okay, look, we'll do some bread and butter stuff and solve some customer problems here, but we've got this bigger problem, which is these planes that are going to do short haul flights and sort of stuff like that.
Right.
But that's going to be years away. So how are you getting that balance as a CEO?
So fortunately for us, and again, going back to the 5-circle Venn diagram, we never do something that's not on the critical path, right? And so if you look at the current industries, including battery electric vehicles, construction and mining, fast charge is a real criticality, right? The ability to repeatedly and punitively fast charge batteries over and over and continue to have their life cycle so we don't put them into the circular economy any faster is critically important. But I'll tell you, that absolutely plays for the future of flight, right? Because if you can fast charge something, you can fast discharge something. So you have to have that power. So what we're doing actually helps for the future products. And that's why we can have that sort of golden ticket on our roadmap. The things that we're developing for today's applications help us to productize tomorrow's.
Yeah, okay. No, great example there. Great example there. Because it sparks for me another thing we do in this sort of electric example. We roll on a few years from our visit to Tesla. We then took a bunch of executives to Oslo, Norway. This was about 4 or 5 years ago, where the electric car penetration, I think the year just before we got there, over 70% of the cars that were purchased in the quarter before we got there were electric vehicles. And that was a combination of government subsidies, a new Tesla model being launched, and and so in one quarter, so they're well over 50%. They're probably 60 or 70% now of the vehicles on the road.
Amazing.
Electric. But then you have to fundamentally change your mindset and your part. So the reason you used about the fast charging is that, well, you've got to put charge points on the street because people live in apartments and they don't have drives.
Absolutely.
They do their trundling around the commute during the week, and then they go off to their cabin in the woods, literally, Oslo, and they've got a 4-hour drive, and I've got to charge when I get there or get back on the way back or sort of something. And there's all these people doing. So you've got those different models you then got to deal with, which is very different to the hydrocarbon model of, well, every vehicle just pulls up at the pump and it's, do you want diesel or do you want unleaded? It's like,
but I have a feeling, I mean, clearly we weren't around, but I have a feeling this same conversation happened in the days of Humble Oil. Having grown up in the oil field myself, I have a feeling the same, okay, how are we going to get this Model A from point A to point B? How are they going to get back to get some gas? Okay. So, I mean, I do believe that the evolution of these industries has to happen in parallel. I actually believe that governments are trying to work on it. I do believe that Europe has been much more progressive than the US, but it's got a smaller area to cover. So it's a more digestible problem, very likely. And so I think that just like 5G and semis, the analogs are there that say, if we build it, they will come.
Yeah. No, great. And people is one of the key P's that I talk about in terms of your process and your purpose and sort of stuff like that. People is central to the things that I do in corporate venturing and startups. What are the sort of people involved in your business and that now in terms of tech and vision in the future and delivering these new business ideas and sort of stuff like that? What sort of people have you got working with you now?
Well, I tell you, one of the things, I'll go to the smallest problem or the biggest problem, which is the most myopic, which is talent. Talent is just so difficult. We don't have enough qualified battery engineers globally for the amount of batteries we need to build. And frankly, we're all fighting over them. And so, cost is going way up in an industry where cost is, has a header. So it's become a real issue. it's funny because every CEO gets at least 12 emails a day from a recruiter, saying, I've got just the right battery guys for you. And I usually send back a very quick email, very polite, saying, I don't think so, because if I had one qualified battery engineer for every 10 of these emails I get, I would hire them, right?
Happy, yeah.
So talent is a real issue. And I think a lot of governments are starting to see that and creating programs earlier, which will address that. I actually am on the National Advisory Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship through the Department of Commerce. And we are really, really focused on addressing this part of the equation as well. So that's one piece. The other piece is, I think our company has been pretty good for a startup at looking at how to have frenemies, right? In the past, right, startups try to be very stealthy and but this is a huge industry and it's very capital intensive. And if we don't shake hands with our competitors and figure out where we can work together and how we can work together safely, I'm not sure how we grow big enough to compete with the behemoths.
Yeah. Okay.
That might be a controversial statement against my those yet to be frenemies, but I think it's a fair statement that we have to come together in more than consortium phases. We actually have to do projects. We have to do work together. We have to actually innovate together.
Yeah, but I think your background and the corporate venturing ethos really comes from that, doesn't it? Because totally. You and I know that pharmaceutical corporate venturing units, automotive corporate venturing units, oil corporate,
all depend upon this.
They were all, we were all working for this third horizon, these new areas, and it was like, okay, well, we're not going to succeed here unless we get the ecosystem right, unless we fund right for the startups and stuff like that. And look, we'll worry about competing when we've got a market to compete over, we've got technology to make. But that collaboration between corporates, between investors, between startups, I think is such an important sort of ecosystem.
Completely.
We're really trying to build. So just slightly tangential, but it's connected, I think, to your talent part. Artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, going back to at the start of this, where we talked about what was happening in the 1990s and what you were sort of doing, my experience then was that back in late 90s, I was in Unilever. They sponsored my doing an MBA. We didn't have email addresses on our business card. I was trying to get my executive to look at Netscape and Mosaic, and oh no, this doesn't work for us. We only go through distributors, and that's why I created the business that I then created to help with innovation within corporates. Because I felt, and that was because I was thinking, look, this .com thing, there's something big and something fundamental is going to change. I've been playing around like other people have been playing around with ChatGPT and that recently, and I've had that. Oh wow, this is big and scary and stuff like that. And I've been playing around with it and that now, and I'm feeling like I did in the late 1990s. Yeah, but it feels like it's going to be bigger and more disruptive. What's your feeling about this? ChatGPT, but also because people can relate to that, but just the broader AI sort of type stuff. And the reason I sparked that is because of your talent thing. It's how we humans are going to start engaging this new technology for technologies and proteins and all the rest of it. So what's your view on the AI sort of type wave that's coming?
So I have I'm going to date myself seriously here, but I have kids, one turning 40 at the end of this month and one 23. Right. So all three boys, all three computer scientists. Right. So I really see this evolution. I also think that because the digital only generation, for them, they may not appreciate this expanding balloon, this expanding bubble, this expanding opportunity. And one of the things that again at NACI with the DOC, that we've been talking about is, how do you get entrepreneurship taught earlier, right? How do we get this kind of history of how things evolve? How do we get this taught in high school, right? Because this helps to have people who understand the analogs.
Yeah.
Right? How did the industry for semiconductors evolve? How did the compound semiconductors, right? All of this helps you to understand and apply it to what's happening today.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what the possibilities are, what to look out for, how to ride the wave. The beauty of innovation and technology development and evolution is about this delicious chaos. Right. And in Texas, we have a saying that says, let the rabbits run, right? Don't follow, let them run and then go from point A to point B. How do you step back, but stay focused?
Yeah.
And I think those are the kinds of questions that we have to ask. I mean, it's a very exciting time. I think of the application for healthcare and the ability to personalize medicine in such a way that we can all be healthier people. Yeah. Phenomenal future.
Yeah. But back to part of the conversation we were having earlier about the value chain is going to change. We're going to have to change practices. We're going to have to change the way we engage with it.
Absolutely.
And I think that the generational thing as well. I think you've raised a good point there between our age group, 40-year-olds. Right. My eldest daughter is 20, and my younger one is 16, and just that 4-year difference, even as you said, that
big difference.
It's and then a 23-year-old, as you sort of got again, that between a 23-year-old, what's happened in that 7 years has been, it's now TikTok, it was Twitter, it was whatever else that we thought was cool at the time, Netscape and Mosaic, it's like,
well, we thought Facebook was cool.
Yeah,
but that just proves we weren't cool.
So we've got all that changing, but you then also sparked something else for me. I've got another little tangent. A business I started called Upstarts for Startups, right? Because I was working with people in corporates to do innovation and venturing, and they would take 9 months to produce a PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
And my young children, when they were about 8, they were doing things like making things for charities and selling things and sort of stuff. And I'd be chatting to the people in the corporates and they'd say, "Oh God, I wish my kids would do." And I'd going, "God, I wish you would do something like that." So Upstarts for Startups is that you bring your children into work, and then we give them. Oh, actually, here's one. You give them a box. Which has got, so we've got about 12 different businesses. So healthy drinks, marketing, bank, running a Formula One race, and making greeting cards, so that the youngsters get the chance to get that, and then the adults sort of help them a bit.
Yeah.
For the older children, the ones who are in their teens, the adults compete against the kids.
Nice.
So in 4 hours, they get a short business briefing, like what brands do you like, what products do you like, right? Get in teams, pick a box, and in that box you've got something like this. This example has just got some little puppets.
Right.
So create a theatre show, sell some tickets, and these youngsters, and one of the ones we give them a Raspberry Pi computer.
Okay.
And they create in a metaverse, they create an advert for a charity company.
Cool.
In 4 hours. And then the parents, the adults have real money and go around and actually buy from these stores. And then the youngsters have a certificate of how much they're going to give to charity because of what they've sold.
Nice.
And at the end of that, you turn around to the adults and say, "Well, why haven't you created this in work today?" Sort of
I mean, we used to do this in the U.S. through what was called junior achievement. Junior achievement still exists, but it's just not as robust as it was in the past. And in some ways we still do it, right? Girl Scout cookie sales, but who sells Girl Scout cookies? Mom and dad take them to work and put them on their desk, right? The bottom line is we do need to teach the generation coming up that everything is about really what your product is, how you present it, and who will buy your product, right? Whether you're going to be a good corporate citizen in a company like IBM, for example, or you're going to be the next battery engineer at EnPower. Just because you're a battery engineer doesn't mean that you relinquish the responsibility of building a product that a customer wants. In fact, that is your responsibility, not to take direction, but to think about it in that perspective.
And it's working as teams and sort of stuff like that as well.
Absolutely.
And that's the bit I'm like going back to the AI question. To me now, it's how this work is going to change and how people relate to the technology and sort of stuff like that. I think is going to be an interesting debate. And I'm talking about that in a positive way rather than a doom and gloom. The computer's going to take over the world sort of type stuff.
There's going to be both, right? There's going to be trouble. There always have been, there always will be. But those challenges allow us to take a step back and create solutions to make things more efficient, more effective, safer, and better for humanity.
Yeah. Look, Annette, this has been so stimulating.
Such a pleasure.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Please like and subscribe to future editions.